Crosshatch and Ecology, written by Taylor Reed. This organization could be called Crosshatch Center for Art and Nature, Crosshatch Center for Art and Farming, Crosshatch Center for Art and Care, Crosshatch Center for Art and Economics, or Crosshatch Center for Art and Community. It isn't. None of those quite fit. It's Crosshatch Center for Art and Ecology. Ecology, a branch of scientific study focused on interactions in the natural world. That covers a lot of ground, which is why ecology sits above plenty of subdisciplines. Social ecology, agroecology, urban ecology, fire ecology, forest ecology, restoration ecology, and landscape ecology, among others. There are many specific focuses, but they're all tied together by the same ecological lens. That ecological lens means paying close attention to how things and beings shape other things and beings. Ecology is a natural science that naturally uplifts discernment, consideration, and trying to understand bigger pictures through the smaller relationships that comprise them. Its breadth allows for flexibility in Crosshatch's work. We can run with prototypes, see how those affect the whole, and pivot, if necessary, to what's needed. At one point, the focus was offering time and space to artists at the Hill House residency. At other times, the mobile processing chicken coop might be the most needed, as well as the food preservation trailer. Cultural events like the Skillshare, or art, philosophy, and film gatherings. Maybe annual get-togethers with the power to shift our understanding of commodity agriculture, ranging from the garlic auction to the Northern Michigan Small Farm Conference. During the COVID pandemic, artists needed economic support, and that's what Crosshatch offered. Sometimes workshops on all sorts of light industrial craft and skills are the focus, and other times, the spotlight is on a venue for music and the arts. There are a host of forms to Crosshatch's work, and each embodies some sort of ecological slant. Of course, as we've mentioned before, this array makes explaining Crosshatch, the core of Crosshatch, tricky. Sometimes a helpful shortcut for explaining Crosshatch's work is to refer to community development, as our long-term push is for strong communities grounded in place. Sometimes, though, that's misunderstood. Community development is sometimes viewed interchangeably with economic development, simply devising ways to bring more dollars into a place. This isn't negative in and of itself, but ecological framing reminds us that those dollars are connected to the rest of the world. If that development ties to environmental degradation, dehumanizing practices, or cultural disarray somewhere along the line, it isn't development, at least in a positive sense. Growth for the sake of growth is not the Crosshatch vision. In that case, what is the ecological way of thinking about economics? What's a perspective appropriate to Crosshatch that supports strong and vibrant rural economies? Ecological economics. You might recognize the idea as doughnut economics, a term made famous by Oxford economist Kate Raworth's 2017 book, Doughnut Economics: 7 Ways to Think Like a 21st Century Economist. The basic premise is that living beings require resources to live, and more so, live well, and this planet's natural cycles and systems can support that well-being remarkably. Infinite growth, though, is the dominant economic impulse we're surrounded by and live within, which clashes with those natural support cycles and the well-being of living things. Lack of equality and basic needs left unmet lie on one side of the equation, known as shortfall, while the ways that we're disrupting this planet's offerings, or overshoot, is on the other. The balanced space between the two, where needs are met and the systems we depend upon are supported rather than depleted, forms a disc-like shape in Raworth's illustration. That's where the donut name comes from. I recently listened to a conversation with ecological economics overlap. A dozen years of economic thumb-twiddling. It's a conversation between Rob Dietz and Richard Heinberg, 2 thinkers involved with Post-Carbon Institute. They've each written books hashing out the need for ecologically minded focus and policy, The End of Growth, Adapting to Our New Economic Reality, and Enough is Enough, Building a Sustainable Economy in a World of Finite Resources. It's been over a decade since those books came out, which provided the occasion for their discussion, delving into the history and motivations between ecological economics, the state of the field today, and their understanding of the impact of their books. Here's a compelling bit from Heinberg, edited slightly for clarity. Quote, "Everyone is saying we need to reduce emissions. That's what all the COP meetings, the IPC, all the environmental organizations are saying. It ain't happening. Emissions are still increasing. There have only been 2 moments in time when we have seen substantial declines in global carbon emissions, right after the 2008 financial crisis and during the COVID pandemic. So we have proof right there that the one thing that we know will actually reduce emissions is shrinking the economy. What we should be talking about is how to shrink the economy in a way that does the least damage to people, societies, political institutions, and so on." End quote. First, there's a lot there keenly focused on emissions. That's not surprising coming from Post-Carbon Institute. Don't get distracted. Solely concentrating on emissions or carbon isn't the point. Shifts in land and resource use carry plenty of weight. It's not just about chasing atmospheric numbers. It isn't clear from this short excerpt from the talk, but Kate Rayworth's work and Post-Carbon Institute both affirm that. Second, this particular example firms up something important while highlighting the radical implications of taking ecology seriously. Situating our doings, visions, and understandings within the limits of an ecological context makes a strong case for cultural work and care. And guess what? Those are both keys to Crosshatch's identity. Countering infinite growth economics calls for different ways of meeting our needs, both individually and societally. That's the work of culture, paying attention to the perspectives we're steeped in our everyday practices. And any time a topic like shrinking the economy comes up, considerable care has to be taken. The repercussions of what that might actually look like, especially to those most vulnerable, can't be glossed over. Heightened empathy as a shaping and motivating force is crucial in effective, ecologically responsive work. Heinberg states that reining in economic growth should be pursued in a way that does the least damage across the board. Later in the talk, he goes further. Not only should harm be avoided, but well-being across the board should be improved while stepping away from the goal of economic growth. The aim isn't to avoid risks, but to be sensitive to them. Ecologically comprehensive efforts with ecologically comprehensive benefits reduce future damages and improve well-being because of awareness of current and potential difficulties. Dietz has a concise illustration for this. Consider the crisis leading to the 2008 to 2010 automotive bailouts. In the face of a crumbling industry, what could those massive injections of energy and money have led to if they had been applied to shaping the future of transportation in the United States? What about long-term, ecologically minded projects, like efficient mass transit systems and bicycle infrastructure, instead of propping up the current status quo? Of course, he notes, that's a policy question, and it's difficult to shift policy if there isn't a significant cultural movement behind it. Elsewhere in the talk, the two concede that envisioning alternatives isn't the uphill battle in the world of ecology. It's figuring out how to get there. That's part of our work. Crosshatch works on prototypes locally and at accessible scales, and over time, ideally, sparks imaginative futures alongside an empowered present. Embracing ecology is fertile ground for joy, life, and meaning, as it pulls the disparate threads of what we do tighter, keeps us thinking deeply, and requires us to care profoundly. That's why it's our last name.